everybody. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of London's Pretty Cool podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Briggs.
And I'm your other host, Aaron Briggs.
Today we are sitting down with another fantastic guest. This is another London staple here in the city. This is a place where me and Aaron have spent many times watching some of the best movies that are either new and upcoming or maybe past and classic. You know, it depends on the night of the week. It depends on who you're going with. But we're really excited about this episode. We're sitting down with Mike Klassen, assistant manager of Hyland Cinema. We're super excited to be sitting with him and talking about the history and the ongoings and goings on and everything going on at the Hyland Cinema. How are you doing today, Mike? It's so good to have you with us.
Yeah, man, I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's good. I just finished a shift and I'm still at work, but in podcast mode, so it's all good, you know.
I like it. They've got kind of like a podcast setup, it looks like, all right back there. Or did you bring that home?
Makeshift one.
Yeah, I kind of dressed it up a little bit for today's episode. So we don't. This is just one of our offices upstairs near the projection booth. So we just kind of turned it into a little makeshift podcast studio for this evening's episode. So
I like it. I like it. Multifaceted rooms. There you go.
Yeah.
I gotta say, Mike, it's really exciting to have you on this episode. As Patrick said, we're big fans of the Hyland.
Awesome.
Me personally live very close. We're regular goers. And then actually, like, our parents got us memberships for Christmas a few years ago. And
Nice.
then our mom just recently texted us. She really wants us to see Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I've seen, but she's like, all right, here are the showings at the Hyland. Go see them. Big text to the group chat. Everyone go watch it at the Hyland. So
That's
it's just
awesome.
great to have you on.
Of course. Well, I'm excited. We got a lot of really cool things. That film, actually, its last show is tonight, I believe, Everything Everywhere. So I don't know when this is coming out necessarily. But this evening on Wednesday will be the last show of that show. We actually, of that film, we actually brought that film back this is the fourth time it's been back at the Hyland. So
cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Worth it. It's such a good movie.
It's really cool how that film has been making like so many waves. I mean, now it's like won Oscars and everything, right? Or I believe it's nominated.
For 11 Oscars, I believe. So did you guys happen to catch the director's first film called Swiss Army Man?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my, I didn't know the same director.
What a funny, wild movie that is.
It's unreal. It's an unreal movie. One of my favorite movies, I would say, of the last 10 years. If the listeners don't know what it is, just it's a farting corpse movie with Harry Potter. So if that doesn't get you in to watch that movie, I don't know what will. So there you go.
I still haven't seen Everything Everywhere All at Once. I'm the only one here who hasn't seen it, but I remember the directing style of that film and just like the way that they would transition between scenes and everything would be singing and you know, like the trees be singing. Or I had never seen a film like that before, so I'm super excited for Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a little bit more Everything Everywhere is a little bit more palatable for a wider audience. So I would say Swiss Army Man is a very specific movie for if you don't have a certain kind of sense of humor, or I mean, that being said, it is funny and dark, but at the same time it has some great themes in it too. Like, it is about loneliness and misconnection and connection and all that kind of stuff. So it is like Everything Everywhere All at Once, in the sense of like it's a multi-layered movie and there's a lot of things going on. Everything Everywhere is just a little bit more, I think, palatable to a wider audience, and it's also much more PG. Though I think they probably had a chance to make it not PG, but it's probably a smarter decision money wise. Yeah,
absolutely. Got to make that money. That's got to make that money.
That's right.
You know, speaking of, we're getting so deep into it already, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. I love this. This is exactly what we want for this episode, because I'm a big movie guy.
Awesome.
Aaron's a big movie person as well, so this is gonna be a great episode. But before we get into all the movies that are going on in the theater, why don't we bring it back a little bit? Mike, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you're involved at the Hyland Cinema?
Sure. Well, I came to the Highland in summer of 2021. Kind of a long journey. I could spend about, I don't know, 2 days explaining how that ended up happening, but very quickly, I graduated from Sheridan College back in 2010 um, through their film program. So I did that, and then I made some movies. So I directed my first feature 4 months after I graduated, and which stars Reggie Bannister from Phantasm, the Phantasm series. I don't know if you're horror fans or not, but those
Cool.
of the listeners that are will know who that is. And Caroline Williams, who was a character Stretch from the movie Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So that was my first film. It premiered at Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal in 2011. Got some, we'll say, distribution in quotes from a company out of the States, which no longer exists. That's a whole probably podcast in itself. I ended up going to LA for a period of time. I produced a movie out there called Without Ward, WARD. That film is now available on Tubi. It took us 10 years to get that movie out. If you know
Congrats.
who, thank you. It just came out. I mean, I say just. I don't know. It's probably 8 months ago now, but to me, it's just. If you know who Martin Landau is, he was in Ed Wood, Tim Burton's Ed Wood. He's been in. He's one of the sort of legends of Hollywood. He's been in Hitchcock movies. Was friends with James Dean. An unbelievable life. Anyway, that film that I produced will be his last released film. So unfortunately, he passed away. He did do some things after he shot with us, but our film took so long to get out that we now have the distinction and pleasure to be the last film that will be released. So if you look on for him, so if you look on his IMDb, our film Without Ward is the last one on there. It also has a great cast. James Duvall's in it. Margaret Moreau from Wet Hot American Summer's in it. James Duvall, if you don't know, he was in all the early Gregor Rocky stuff. If you're into weird independent stuff, he was also in Independence Day. He was the bunny in Donnie Darko. So he's
Oh,
been
okay.
around. Yeah,
Gotcha.
he's been around. Margaret Moreau's in it. Alexis Dezena. So it just has a really great cast of sort of independent who, I think. So that film's on Tubi. It's called Without Ward. I then kind of branched out, kind of did a bunch of different things after that. I worked at a summer camp as a program director for 10 years. That allowed me to make films and be a creator and artist because it was seasonal. So in that period of time, I wrote and directed 2 feature films, as well as I was involved in with my creative partner, Jason Armstrong at SKG Films. I was involved in some web series stuff. So his flagship what we call, I guess, or they call the flagship show called Swerve. There's 3 seasons of it. It's on YouTube. You can just search Swerve. There's an offshoot, the spin-off show called Circa 1981. We also did a 9-part series called 9 Days with Cambria, which focuses on one character played by 9 different actresses. So it's kind of cool. So yeah, a lot of different things. And then obviously COVID hits. I was supposed to be traveling in 2020, which was a perfect year to pick to travel. Ended up being, obviously, like everyone, at home for a period of time. Ended up needing to get out of the place that I was in. So I ended up moving cities and decided maybe it was time to try and get a 9 to 5 type situation, which I hadn't done in quite some time. But I just didn't want to do something or find myself in a situation where I wasn't passionate about what I was doing, because I had been so passionate about the camp industry and working with kids inside of the summer camp sort of circumstance of that, and summers, falls, springs. It was just an incredible time to be and place to work. It was up in Algonquin Park. The camp was called Camp Tamaqua. It obviously still is running. It's been running since 1936. So my period of time was a small 9.5 year window, but I was passionate about that, obviously passionate about film. So, I just needed to find something. I've always wanted to work at an independent cinema. It was like being a 90s kid. And by the way, I say 90s kid is I was born in 85. So I'm a true 90s kid. If you're born in the 90s, you're not a 90s kid. Sorry if that offends anybody,
I'm gonna
but
say
that's
both of us, but anyways.
Just like I wouldn't call myself an 80s kid. I don't remember the 80s. I was around, but don't remember it. But it, growing up with, video stores and movies, like you actually had to go into a store and get a movie, and you went into these like cinemas that were just like, I don't know, I just felt like they were just magic, right? And movies played and you're like, oh my gosh. And as a kid, and a teenager, I always wanted to work at and I just thought it'd be so cool. So now, many years later, they ended up hiring me. I just applied here on a whim, and they ended up hiring me, and kind of made our way through the whole COVID ups and downs of sort of being shut and open, and we kind of got our way through we found our way through it, which was tough in a lot of ways. But things seem to be, I don't want to speak too soon, obviously, but the last few months have been much better. And yeah, so we're just trying to keep plugging along and keep trying to put on great shows and great events and series and playing great movies, and hopefully people will come back, and it seems like they are. I think it also has a lot to do with there was a pretty big drought there with films and releases, and they didn't want to release during COVID, so then they pushed back a lot of releases, and then movies weren't being made. And I mean, it was just a crazy last couple of years for films. So, but thanks to Tom Cruise and Top Gun, people seem to actually want to go back to the cinema, and that was great. And so that kind of kicked things off, I think, of everyone kind of going back to the cinema. And we got a slew of really great films over the last few months, so people have seemed to be coming back, so that's great. And yeah, I've just been there. I've been here since summer of 2021, so a couple weeks before my birthday, actually. So yeah.
Very
So
cool.
that's a very quick. I try to be as quick and concise as possible as to what led me here, but that's basically very a quick summation.
Oh, it's like quite the history. I didn't realize you had quite like such a history in film yourself,
Yep.
I like that a person running the movies there has made some movies themselves. It's always good to know that, like, the ins and outs.
Yeah, it's tough, but I mean, it's interesting being on it, because I've been on so many different sides of the film industry. Whether it's been, as a filmmaker is one side, a producer is almost a different kind of side than the creative side. I've been, and then now being on, the exhibitor side, you get a whole different kind of perspective on, and some things don't change, like with distributors, and specifically with Canadian, the way that Canadian big businesses are run, and Canadian film is run. You see a lot of the same trends on the exhibitor side that you do on the production side. So that is kind of interesting. But there's obviously a lot of things to learn. I've learned a lot, obviously, being here, but yeah, but obviously my film knowledge and experience definitely comes into, is kind of an asset for sure. And but I'm always trying to pack new knowledge in and learn more and all that kind of stuff. That being said, it is the analogy I like to use is like the gym teacher of filmmaking. So that's kind of like, that's the wrestling my brain has to do, of like, no, I'm still a filmmaker, I'm still an artist, I'm still putting out stuff, but then at the same time you're on the other side of things and showing other people's movies, which is noble and respectful, and there's a lot of merit there. But as someone who's experienced, not just filmmaking, but Los Angeles filmmaking in a way that a lot of people don't get to experience, you get a taste of that, and it's hard to, all be on this side too. So it's a constant struggle. But there's a lot worse things I could be doing, and I have done. So I
Mhm.
mean, coming to work every day, and scheduling cool movies and talking movies with customers, and what could be cool and all that kind of stuff like that. It's hard to say that's a bad day at the office. So yeah.
Well, it's great that your whole life has kind of led you to our wonderful independent cinema of the
I
Highland.
know, I know. I'm very excited, and I have been since I got here. Actually, I think about 2 weeks after I started, the first event that I was at or that I was a part of, like behind the counter, was Pulp Fiction by Tarantino. So
Nice.
Mm.
that is kind of interesting, and was cool, and we ran it on film, I believe. So when I walked in for my first shift, all I saw was like the cans sitting on in the corner, and I'm like, hey, that's Pulp Fiction on 35 millimeter. Like, I
That's
mean,
so cool.
a lot of things can go wrong at work, but like that's pretty cool. That's a cool thing to see. So yeah, yeah, there's a lot worse jobs out there.
I know you've kind of only been there since 2020, but do you know a little bit of the history of the Highland that you can
I
share for
do.
us and our listeners?
I absolutely do. Yeah. So it was opened in the 30s, from what I understand. The year is maybe up for debate, or what I've heard multiple different years. Some say 36, some say 37. It was the 30s. Um, we do have customers and members here that remember. Usually, the film that they point to is Sound of Music.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. Maybe even your grandparents have talked about, or something like that. But people do come in and say, "Yeah, I remember when Sound of Music opened here, and I saw it here." So that would have been 1965 ish, 1966. So it ran as a theater for years and years and years, as the Elmwood, I believe. Um, it then was taken over by Cineplex and ran as Cineplex for some time. It was then not a theater for a little while. It was a few different things, a church, I believe, at one point. It was a few different things, and then a couple by the name of Moira and Ali bought it in the early 2000s, and I believe 18, 19 years ago. And they've been running it ever since, called it the Hyland Cinema. And it is just off of Elmwood Street. So that's why it was probably called the Elmwood. But they called it the Hyland Cinema. And yeah, so they've been running it. It's been the same two owners, a married couple, that have owned this part of its history for yeah, since the early 2000s. So that's, I guess, a little bit of the history. Again, try to skip through some stuff, and but yeah, that's sort of how we got here, um in terms of like ownership and changing hands and that kind of stuff. So
Very cool. I had no idea
mhm.
that it was not a theater for a little while. That's so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, I think it was the 80s. Vic knows a little bit, our projectionist knows a little bit more about the specific dates, but I believe it was mid-ish 80s, late 80s, and through the 90s. It was kind of a few different things. Again, I could be getting, so I know maybe some loyal dedicated Londoners might be like, how dare you get those wrong? But hey, I wasn't born in this town, though. I was born relatively close, and I have been in London my whole life in one way, shape, or another. I haven't lived in London, but have lived around London, and have spent a lot of time in London my whole life. So, but yeah, don't
Come
castrate me,
on in.
or castrate me for getting some dates wrong or whatever. But yeah.
I know when I was doing a little bit of research for this, I remember reading, and again, if I'm wrong, don't quote me on it, but they were saying that it was a theater for a really long time up until Galleria opened, like the
Hmm.
Rainbow Cinema in
Yep.
Galleria Mall, and that kind of took a lot of their customers away. And
Yep.
so that's when it changed over to something else, and then this new
Yep.
couple bought it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And by the time the early 2000s took over, the whole industry had changed, and the idea of multiplexes and all of that kind of stuff kind of that's where people were going to see movies. But there is like this lane where you could have an independent cinema be successful and run if the people running it were smart and knew what films to bring in and knew the audience. And because that's the other thing, is it's not like, not every, well, every independent cinema is different. It's totally based on who's around you and who's coming to your theater. So a film that will work here may not even work 45 minutes down the road or an hour down the road. Like some films are universal, obviously, or but like London, for example, has a pretty big horror community in London. So we've kind of cultivated a pretty that community, and our horror events actually do quite well. And but that may not be the case in other places. It's all dependent on where you are located is such a huge thing. And then of course, if you're knowledgeable and smart and can pick the right movies at the right times, know what's coming in down the pipeline, and can put the movies in, like the film that Moira, our owner, points to often is Parasite, and how they were jumped on Parasite
Yes.
before, yeah, before the sort of swell of that movie. And so, and not to get too like inside baseball on the whole thing, but it's really it's not just important to do that for customers, to make sure we have an eclectic, there's lots of things to do in the city, and that's a nice thing to say, but it's actually like there's a practical reason why that is because the way things work in Canada and the way things work in the film industry here, like on the exhibitor side, is very strange and weird. And the big guys get to have their feed. And so if we couldn't really survive playing big movies like Marvel movies and stuff, because one, we wouldn't get them till so far after they've been played, and two, we'd have to pay so much money of a percentage to the distributors. So it doesn't make financial sense to be doing that, aside from the sort of artistic merit of not showing certain kinds of movies, because that's not what an art house does. Like that's part of it too, absolutely. But there's this other practical part that it doesn't necessarily make, especially in a town like London, where you have multiplexes all around. People can go and see the big movies at the big theaters. And so what we have to do is try to, like I said, be smart about it and pick the right movies, and pick movies that aren't being played at the multiplexes, aren't being played at the where the big boys are. And so that we're the only place that you can see that a certain kind of movie. And that's kind of what the role, I guess, as an independent cinema is to make sure that we're playing stuff that people can't see anywhere else. And hopefully now, and I think it is turning, and actually the generation and generation underneath, 2 generations underneath me as well, I believe are starting to see like merit and reason to go to the cinema, and why it's better, why you shouldn't watch Top Gun Maverick on your phone, and why that's an insane thing to do. You should see it on a giant screen with amazing sound. It doesn't have to be the Hyland. Obviously, we didn't play Top Gun Maverick, but go to any cinema and go see a movie, because that's it's a different experience than your home experience. And I think people are starting to turn back to that. We definitely see it with our older films as well. We play films that you can get on any streaming service. but we'll get like, we just had 300 people out for The Shining at the beginning of this year. But you see The Shining at home. Like you could see it on a streaming service if you want, but there's something about seeing it on the big screen, seeing it with the sound, and then don't you can't forget about the collective experience of seeing a movie with a bunch of that collective experience is different than sitting alone in your room watching it on a tiny screen. It just is. So yeah.
You've answered a lot of our questions here, before I've even asked them. I love this, because, but I kind of wanted to expand on that, if you don't mind, just the last point
Sure.
there. Because you've kind of pointed out like why it's important for like people to go to the theater at all and just like, experience that. But why specifically is it important for London to have a cinema like the Hyland Cinema? Like you
Yeah.
pointed out earlier, like it's definitely based around like getting movies that you'll never see anywhere else. But like, can you expand on that maybe a little bit?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think like when I say like, Moira and Ali and the people that have worked here before me all did it as well, but albeit in a different time. But when I say being smart and being about, what you show and the films that you choose, it's about it's about knowing, like, understanding what the other cinemas are doing and what movies are coming out, and then being able to um offer the customer and offer the people that are around, like the city that you're around, something that they're not going to get over there, right? And that's really the lane that's the lane that we're in, and that's what will make us successful, and has made us successful in the past and will continue to make us successful going forward. I mean, I'll look no further than what we'll get to, the Cinema Speculation series. Like, there's like, Cineplex is not doing that. Like, there's no one at Cineplex thinking, I read a Tarantino book, we should play 5 of the movies he talks about and tie it in and bring guests in from the local, city to talk about those movies. Like, no one's thinking that, because they don't have to.
Yeah.
Right? They don't have to think like that, because they have Ant-Man and the Wasp coming in, and everyone's going to come and see that. So they don't have to think like that, right? So they have a bunch of other problems that we don't have to deal with, but that's not one of. They don't have to be creative in that way. They're going to take the biggest movies and they're going to show them, and as long as there's not a global pandemic for 2 years, people are going to show up to the movies, right? So they don't have to be creative in that way, but we do. We have to, it's not just about choosing good movies that are coming up or that are being released. It's also, what other things are we offering? What other cool one-time shows are we offering? What other, we do a lot of local independent like films that, they come here because it's way, like, I mean, I've screened my films at a Cineplex too. It's not as cool. I screened a bunch of films back in the day. I ran a film festival for a couple of years at the Fox Theater in Toronto. I mean, that's way cooler than your movie being shown in Cineplex, because they like, this is where you probably need to bleep stuff out, but they don't give a shit. They don't care. They don't give a shit. They don't care about you as a person. It's just that there's a person that's at the counter that is hired to do a thing and punch in numbers, and that's it. You could name 4 movies to them, and they may not know any of them, or they might be like a film genius. Who knows? But what I do know is they don't have to be, because they're just part of a giant system. Whereas here, we have a very small staff. We have to multitask. We have to do, like, I picked up popcorn today, and I also, booked movies today too. I did both those things, right? And so that's what our projectionist does. He's the guy that's giving you popcorn. Like, our graphics guy, Zach, is also the guy that's cleaning the theater after the movies. Like, we're always multitasking, right? Which is nice, because you get a personal, like, you can talk to us and you can talk movies and all that, and that's nice. But it's also, there's a negative side to that too, is because we can't focus on a lot of the things that we could be focusing on if we had more staff or whatever. But that's just not that's just not in the cards for a small theater, right? So there's like pros and cons, but yeah, when I talk about being smart about things and specifically programming, it's not just about the movies coming up. It's also, you know, bringing in things, whether that's rentals, like, you know, doing a one-time show for a charity, you know, which we do all the time. Like, and we're not the, I want to be clear, it's not like I'm saying, oh, the Highland's the only theater. Every independent theater does that. Right? Like, we're just the only one in London. But like, you know, if you go to Hamilton, the Playhouse, or Princess, or the Fox, Apollo, like all of these theaters do rentals. They do. I've seen many independent films at all these theaters. Like, they do the same thing. So that's something that's important and something we have to be smart about. And like I said, you know, when you're in a position where, like myself, where, you know, I get to be somewhat creative sometimes and can think of certain ideas. If I was just a manager at some giant Cineplex or wherever, they don't give a shit that I have an idea. They couldn't fucking care at all. They don't care at all. So, but Moira, like our owner, really cares, because if it's a good idea, it could bring a lot of people back to the theater, or to the theater for the first time, depending on the film, bring an older generation back or a newer generation to the theater for the first time. So there's a lot of elements that, you know, go into, you know, thinking of different ideas and series for, you know, for creative programming. And that's, I guess, one of the benefits, because, you know, I get to be creative, but also it's like, I mean, we you know, been working on this series, the cinema speculation series, since December. So like, you know, we're already on to April and May, and like it doesn't end. You know, it's not like, oh, cool, we have one, you know, cool idea for a series and that's it. Well, see you in a year or whatever. Like, it doesn't stop, right? It's
Constant.
like, yeah, it's just, okay, well, what's the next idea, right? And
Yeah.
people come to expect that, you know, like, oh, the Highland is doing this, or, you know, they always show cool film. Like, we just did Roman Holiday for its 70th anniversary, right? And our the people that know us and know our cinema expect those kind of things, that we're gonna play Casablanca, or we're gonna play, you know, It's a Wonderful Life at Christmas time, and we're gonna bring back, you know, some older films to the cinema, so you can experience them on the big screen, because maybe you weren't born yet, or maybe you missed them, or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say I think what brought our family, or me at least, a lot of the first times that I went to the Highland were for those kinds of events. Like, I went and saw, uh, what is it, Inglorious Bastards for the first time
Oh yeah.
there, and so like
Hmm.
those were, I was like, oh yeah, we got to go see it on the big screen. But
Yep.
you, speaking of Tarantino movies, you brought it up a couple times, so let's jump
Sure.
into it a little more. Uh,
Sure.
this cinema speculation film series is
Hmm.
starting on March 3rd. It's kind of named after, inspired by Quentin Tarantino's new book. So, how did you decide to kind of start this, and what should everyone be prepared for?
Well, I'll plug another podcast, because I think that's cool too. Not that you guys are in competition with them. You guys do something totally different. But Tarantino has a podcast called the Video Archives Podcast. He does it with a man by the name of Roger Avery, which is maybe not, he's not as household of a name as Tarantino, but he's the guy that helped Tarantino write some of the stories in Pulp Fiction. So and he also made his own movie called Killing Zoe. He's made a couple of films as well. But he worked at the video store that Quentin worked at back in the day, before Quentin Tarantino was Quentin Tarantino. So that's how they became friends. And they've been friends for, oh, whatever, 5 decades, whatever. So they decided to start a podcast where they watch 3 movies on VHS, because physical media is king, and we can get into that as well. Aside from obviously the theater, but I would say number 2 is physical media. Specifically VHS. I have a soft spot for VHS, but I would include any physical media in there. So they watch 3 films on VHS, and then they talk about them. The other person that's involved is Roger's daughter, Gala, I believe. I think that's her name. Anyways, so there's kind of the two of them, and then she comes in and they talk about these films. Anyway, so it hasn't been going for that long, and they did a promo for this upcoming book by Tarantino back in I want to say late October, early November, where Roger actually read a portion of the book on the podcast. And his reading, I mean, he has a great voice, but like his reading was so good. I was like, oh, I'm hooked already. So I actually got the audiobook first before I bought the book. Because I drive so much. I live 45 minutes out of town. So I drive an hour and a half every day. So I just put that almost just like a podcast, right? And I just listened to the audiobook and was fascinated by it. It's really cool. Even if you're not a Tarantino fan, I would highly recommend it. If you're into film whatsoever, it is a speculation in the sense of he talks about his own experience with the movies, with specific movies, and how he discovered them in the 70s, but then he speculates on what could have been or what things could have looked like, if, like, for example, in real life, the script Taxi Driver, which was written by Paul Schrader, he actually gave it to Brian De Palma first. And so that's one of the things he speculated. What would Taxi Driver look like if Brian De Palma directed it and not Martin Scorsese, right? And so these are, and he goes into great detail about different scenes of movies and what they could be, what they couldn't be, and it's very cool. He doesn't. The book is kind of broken into, well, it is broken into chapters, and the chapters are movies, and they're chronological. They start in, I believe, 68. And it ends in 81. So like the year 81. Excuse me. So as I was listening to this book, I was like, man, these are like some really good movies, some of my favorite movies. Some movies that I had been aware of but hadn't seen in quite some time. So it was really interesting to hear his take on things and why things meant so much. Because the other thing he talks about as well is like the impact that the films had on modern cinema. So really, what we think as modern cinema, and I'll go off of Tarantino now for a moment, that not just the films that he talks about in the book, but really 70s cinema and the 70s filmmakers are really what created what we understand as modern cinema. So that's we're all just doing the things that they did, and in different ways, of course, with different mediums and whatnot. But how we understand movies all can be traced back to the things that were done in the 70s. Now, obviously, they're influenced by different things and whatnot, but there was a very clear revolution, not just in how movies were being made, but what they were being made, like who was making them, what the topics were, the characters saying them, all of these kinds of things. So now back to this book, I couldn't sleep. It was about like 4 a.m. And I was just thinking, like, how cool would it be if there was, like, if we could see all these movies like in a row, like how cool would that be? And then I was like, wait a second, I work at a cinema. Like, I wonder if there would be like a series or something that we could do. So I started putting together a document. As with everything at the Hyland, obviously I can't speak for other independents, but at the Hyland anyways, everything is sort of, if one person has an idea, it's always run by everyone else as to, like, and so it can mold and change, and you can bounce things. So obviously that's what I did. I talked to Zach, who's our graphics guy, and Vic, who's our projectionist, and who has a vast knowledge of film and has been around film his whole life. So, hey, could this be something? Like, what could this look like? What, do we do it weekly? Do we do all 13 films? Because I believe he talks about, or at least there's 13 chapters. He talks about many, many films, but there's 13 chapters. So do we do all 13 movies? Like, is that even possible? So we ended up sort of, through discussions, distilling it down to 5 films, doing it weekly, and we picked March because there's 5 Fridays in March. So It just so happened that and it was far enough away that we felt like we could get things organized, because there was also an added element that we wanted to bring in guests for each film to talk about. So they'll I'll be on stage with the guests, and we will talk about the movie and put it out to the audience for a Q&A and have a discussion about the movie, because that's something that's really important. Again, something you don't get at the other megaplexes. You know, people talking about the movie after the movie and before the movie, which I think is really important and very cool. So we had to get guests that were interesting and that were available and that could commit, you know, a couple months out. So there was a lot of work that went into, you know, what the series could look like. So we landed on 5 films. The 5 films are Taxi Driver, which is March 3rd, Sisters, Brian De Palma's Sisters, which is March 10th. And then we're going to do Deliverance, which is March 17th, and then Escape from Alcatraz, which is March 24th. And we're going to end it with Dirty Harry, which is March 31st. So all that information can be found on our website, hylandcinema.com. Our socials as well, like Instagram, Facebook, we post all over there. So you can check all those things out. But that's the lineup of films. And we also have a lineup of guests, starting with a man by the name of John Reed, who's a Western University professor. So he's going to be here talking with me about Taxi Driver. So we're going to do a little talk beforehand, a little talk afterwards. It's going to be every Friday at 9:30 p.m. Tickets are all available right now for all the shows. It's $15, no matter if you're members, non-members, no matter your age, all that stuff, 15 flat. And that's sort of the idea and concept, which I thought was a pretty cool idea.
Yeah.
And not that it has to do with, like, Tarantino didn't make any of these movies. We're not like taking his book and making it like something it's not. It's just a way to tie Tarantino in, because he's a name and he's a marquee name, and he just wrote this book, which I believe everyone should go and read if you're into film. So it's a way to, I'm not that he needs promotion for his book, but if people didn't know he wrote a book, now they can know that he wrote a book. And so yeah, we just took 5 films out of there. They're not in obviously, if you know anything about these movies, they're not in chronological order, and they're not in the order that Tarantino talks about in his book. He goes, like I said, in chronological order. We did it based on what the series what we thought the best way to go about the series would be, in terms of starting it off with a bang, ending with a bang. We also wanted to hit our horror at the Hyland market, which is the second Friday of every month. We always show a horror film. So he talks about 2 horror films in this book. Sisters is one of them, and the other one is Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse, which came out in 1981. So I picked Sisters as the one that I thought was the better choice because of De Palma's name. I think people know, even though I don't think a lot of people have seen Sisters, people know who Brian De Palma is. Now, obviously, people know who Tobe Hooper is, but he's not a big. I would argue he's not as big of a household name as Brian De Palma is. So, also, there was a little bit of film education involved too. In terms of the choices that we made and what films we showed and when. So with Sisters specifically, I thought it was an interesting choice to show an early De Palma film to get sort of his sense as a filmmaker and director before we knew him as Brian De Palma, right? So he hadn't made Carrie yet. He hadn't made Dress to Kill. He hadn't made Scarface. He hadn't made all these, The Untouchables, all these films that everyone will come to love as classics. He's not that person yet. He's just this kid trying to make movies in New York City, and for no money. And this was just one of them. It was a non-union independent film, very, very influenced by Hitchcock. So which is another interesting thing to talk about when you're talking with guests and all that kind of stuff, to sort of bring in, because he kind of was billed as sort of the new era or the new guy that was like the new Hitchcock when De Palma came out. So I mean, you look no further than obviously Dress to Kill, which that a lot of people point to Hitchcock with that movie, and a lot of his other work. But specifically with Sisters, it's a pretty clear he's stretching his wings and trying out some stuff and, you know, mimicking some stuff that he saw or that really excited him that he saw Hitchcock do. So it's just as film education, I think that's really interesting to see someone kind of, you know, hey, here's a movie that's actually a pretty good movie. And here's a reason to come and see it. I don't know if we showed Sisters just on its own as a standalone film, anyone would come. But if we put it inside of this series, hopefully people will come see a movie that they wouldn't necessarily, you know, search out or go and see or even know about necessarily. So and then get something out of it. So there is sort of method to the madness as well. Like we didn't just choose 5 random movies we just didn't pick from a hat. So so that's a little bit, I guess, about the Cinema Speculation series, and we just called it that because that's what the book is called. And yeah, that's so those 5, like I said, those 5 movies are 5 of the movies that Tarantino talks about in his book. So that's how that was our little pool that we pulled from. Yeah.
Which one are you looking most forward to watching?
That's a good question. I have not seen any of these movies on the big screen, so that's really interesting. I have a relationship with all the films, as in like I have like I mean Sisters definitely more recently, because I went on a kind of a big De Palma kick during COVID, where I just like, I mean, I don't know if like I know there's some cinephiles out there that do this, but that's why IMDb exists, is so that you can look up your favorite movie and then find out what else that person has done, and then you can literally find all the movies that person has done because of the internet, obviously, and you could just watch them all. So that's, I mean, that's what I did. Obviously I had seen a lot of De Palma's work, but there was like some stuff that just got by me, and Sisters was one of them. So so that one's much more recent, but yeah, I mean, all of them I have not seen on the big screen, so that's really interesting. One of my personal favorite, and I think one of the greatest films ever made, and one of my favorite films ever made, and those are 2 different categories, by the way, but this one I think it can coexist in both, is Taxi Driver. That I mean, there's one of, I think, the marks of a great film is if it can be well, at least in my opinion, if it can be controversial again and again and again for different reasons. So like the movie is finite, right? The movie, it starts, you know, and the music comes in and the taxi comes in and Travis Bickle does his thing and blood and guts and craziness, and the movie ends. And that's the way the movie was in 1976, and that's the movie it is now, right? That is finite. What's not is like our perspective. Society has changed, ebbed and flowed, and therefore the way that with a movie as interesting and deep, and with a character as crazy and dark and weird as Travis Bickle, you're going to find things like what was controversial in 1976 may not be the same thing that's controversial about that film now. Look no further than like the Vietnam War. That's not really in the conscious of people, or young people my age even, but that was a big thing back then because it just had ended, and that was a big part of that story. But we kind of just, and why people didn't, what are you saying, all Vietnam vets are crazy and are going to go and kill people? Like that was like a big thing. Whereas now we don't even, that doesn't even, what we are focused on now is his relationship, or his hatred, or his attitude towards people of color, and how he treats them. Somehow that is the thing now that is controversial, right? None of the things that Travis does, he doesn't do anything different. He did the same thing. It's the same movie, right? But our perspective changed, right? And the way that society has grown and not grown, and or however you want to word that, then we look at that kind of film through a different lens, and all of a sudden it becomes controversial again, right? Like you could show this movie to a bunch of 18-year-olds and their minds would explode that this even existed. that this was a movie, right?
Yeah.
And that's crazy, you know. Like, and not in, and what's crazy is, and not in a way that is because again, the complexity of the film, not in a way that is like breakfast like Breakfast at Tiffany's, right? Where there's a very obviously terrible casting choice and humor used in that movie. Now, I'm not saying that you know, Truman Capote and those and the people that wrote, he wrote the book and the screenplay, and the people that made that movie and Aubrey Hepburn are all terrible people, and it's a terrible movie. I would never say that, and I don't think that that's true. That being said, do I look at that film differently as when I saw it when I was 10? I knew something was weird about it because I was like, there's that, I know Asian people, that guy's not Asian. And that's like, that's crazy that that's a movie. So that was, to me, Taxi Driver was not made with that same kind of intent. It was very intentional what they were doing. Travis is a very thought out and well acted, well written character, that he's doing things. Now, you may not agree, you may not agree with what he's doing, and that's okay. Right? But that doesn't change the fact that it's not made from, at least in my opinion, it's not made with this like blind eye or whatever. So there is that different, in my opinion, which is again why a lot of modern cinema can be taken from, like I said, going back to what I said earlier, from the 70s, right? So yeah, and you had this like snot-nosed kid that no one had really gave two shits about, you know, Martin Scorsese. Who is this kid? You know, the studio just kind of threw him a couple $1 million and said, go and make your movie. Like, we don't care. It's not, you know, it doesn't matter. Yeah, he ended up using Robert De Niro, who, I mean, yeah, he had a little bit of clout, obviously coming off of The Godfather too. But he wasn't the De Niro that we know. And I think that's a really interesting, again, thing to set the audience up with, especially with Taxi Driver, is like that the whole, you know, who you talking to me, that's just been part of our, I've not been alive where that's just been a thing in the zeitgeist in popular culture. But there was a time where that didn't exist. There's also was a time where Martin Scorsese wasn't Martin Scorsese and De Niro wasn't De Niro. And there were just these kids running around New York City with a lot of drugs and some cameras and a really good script by an absolutely insane human being, Paul Schrader. And they made a movie. And they made a movie that, I mean, is not only stood the test of time as a movie, but like is one of the greatest films and one of the greatest character studies of all time. And they did it with like permits. What are those? Like, it was like run and gun. Like, the fact that they got anything and they did anything is crazy, let alone make one of the greatest movies ever made. So I always equate it back to now where, you know, you have filmmakers that are, you know, they blame their cast, they blame society for not wanting to see their movies because they think society is A, B, or C. They're not woke enough, they're too woke, whatever the excuse is. There's always excuses why, you know, people aren't seeing movies, right? And these people, I mean, I'll the example I'll give is Don't Worry, Darling. Now, that's a movie that the filmmaker was given every, I mean, just her choice of cast, all this money was basically carte blanche, right? And made a movie that, in my humble opinion, was made by like a second-year film student, right? And I'm not saying that the themes in that are I'm just saying that it's not important, or what they were talking about isn't important, or what they had to say wasn't important. I'm just purely talking about the execution, the idea and the execution of that film was maybe second-year film student, at best second-year film student. And they had carte blanche pretty much to do whatever they wanted. They could choose who, we have, you know, Even Stevens in our movie. Now we don't have Even. We're going to get a different famous guy. I mean, it was just whatever they wanted, they could get. And they made I mean, at best, a lukewarm movie. And then you have these guys that, you know, no one gave a shit about what they were doing. They didn't have the money. No one cared about who they were. They had a good script with a phenomenal actor, and they had to work to get the cast, to get a film made, and that's what they came up with. So what are we doing? Right? And I don't mean to be pointed at that particular film. I'm just using that as an example. There's lots of examples of modern films that have, in my opinion, this problem of just given carte blanche to do whatever they want, and they're not making great films, in my opinion. So, and again, it's not to say that there isn't great films nowadays. There absolutely is. It's just, yeah, there's something very punk rock about what was happening back then, and there's certain things that can be punk rock now. Like I would actually contest that Everything Everywhere is a very punk rock movie, that it was done, you know, the effects were done by like 5 people. They had this giant idea and they had to use all their powers, all their independent film powers to get this crazy big idea movie made. They had to cast it really smart. They had to, you know, all of this points to, you know, people that had something to say, that cared about what they were doing. That, you know, it was like their second feature film. No one real, if you said 2 years ago or a year ago when you saw when this movie was being released, oh yeah, this is going to be nominated for 11 Oscars, you'd be like, yeah, you're a crazy person. So that's to me, that's an example of a movie that is like, there are good movies made now. It's just I think we also like to focus on a lot of negative stuff now, which I try not to do. Like there's you know, especially in film, where there's you know, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of critics and couch critics and phone critics, and I don't know if all of that is any good or doing us any favors. So, you
Or I
know,
would say, like, especially with the Don't Worry Darling, it's people, the drama with the actors outweighs the actual movie. So no one
that's
went to
right.
go see it because of all of this outward drama. So it might have been a good, like, gotten better, but
Yep.
people were like, there's too much drama with the actors and all this stuff. I don't actually care about the movie. I just want to know what's going on with these.
And then one wonders if that was just a way of marketing the film, because they knew the film was a disaster, right? So, you know, if people were talking about the film, even as a way of getting into the drama part, at least they were mentioning the film. It's like advertising, right? So I don't know. I just think like it was a fine concept. It's just, I just didn't think that particular filmmaker and that particular film really said anything different, or really had anything to say at all. I don't know, and I could be wrong, that you know, men controlling women and that being a concept for a movie is really a deep enough okay, cool, I'm on board, I get what you're saying, but what do you have to say about it? And in that movie, I think nothing they had to, that's what they had to say about it, is that men control women. That's what they had to say about that particular topic, which I'm not really interested in. I'd be more interested in that movie if I could see what that person thought about that particular topic. Whether I agreed with it or not doesn't matter. I want to see what that individual thinks about it. That's a reason to make a movie. You know what I mean? That's why you'd be passionate to make a movie, is because you're like, I really believe this, and I really think that this is saying something, and I'm going to use this tool, this incredibly powerful tool, to tell a story that really means everything to me. I'm into that movie. I want to see that, whatever version of Don't Worry Darling that is. I want to see that. But whatever came out, I don't want to see that. I mean, I saw it and I didn't want to see it. So yeah.
Well,
I don't mean to harp on that movie either. So
no worries. You know,
Yeah.
movies can be good, movies can be bad. You know, I'm always very critical, but I always try to find like, I actually didn't end up watching Don't Worry Darling, just because of all the the craziness and everything. So, you know, it,
And you weren't alone. I'm sure you weren't alone. I mean, Aaron mentioned it, right? So
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
So
you
it's
weren't alone.
you know,
People were like, "Ah, this is too much.
yeah,
It's too
exactly. Kind
much."
of, it's
I want.
so
Just give me just
Yeah,
give
give
me
me
Top
Top
Gun.
Gun.
Yeah, give me Tom Cruise flying around in a airplane for a while. Like I'm into that, right? So
mm,
yeah,
well,
which
yeah,
I get. I I totally get that.
well, that's a good reason to go to a theater, right? You know, you've got a film that like demands you go there to experience, like you said, the sound and the feeling. Like when you go see Top Gun Maverick in a big theater, you feel the engine revving by. It's kind of crazy, you know, like it
100%
really,
you do. Yeah,
it's a different
yeah.
experience, you know. But
So
speaking of that,
let me ask you what.
oh, sorry,
Okay,
no,
go
go ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, you go ahead.
Well, I
Sorry.
was gonna say like. I was gonna say like I mean I've been talking a lot like tell me like a favorite movie or something you saw recently you really liked like what give me something that
I'm
you've
trying to
seen. You
think.
can start Patrick and then Eric or Aaron, sorry, and then Aaron you could, or it doesn't matter who goes first, but just
I'm trying
talk
to
about
think.
something you liked or that is your favorite. It could be your favorite. I hate saying favorite because I think favorites change, at least mine do. um my favorite films change as I grow as a person. So it doesn't it could be your favorite right now or something you saw recently that you really liked, or yeah.
If you need to think, Patrick, I have one that comes right to mind.
Go for it. Go for it.
Let's
So this
hear it.
movie that I saw, we watched recently, and it's funny because I watched it with my boyfriend, and he always jokes that I hate like the nervous movies. I like comedies, like let's just sit around and have a good time, laugh, don't have to think too hard about it movies. But we watched Shiva Baby, and I loved it. It was just
Awesome.
like an hour and a half of just pure stress. Like, oh my God, someone's gonna say something and ruin everything. But it was such a good movie. I loved it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I've never
Awesome.
heard of that. Shiva Baby.
Gotta watch it. It's on Crave.
Okay,
It's on,
cool.
yes, it is.
Cool. All right. For me, I don't know. I can't think of a new one that I've seen recently that kind of blew me away. We've been kind of reaching back a little bit. We just watched the original Tron again
Okay.
not too long
Yeah.
ago. I've been kind of on a real like kind of sci-fi kick as of late, and
Very
so
cool.
I've
Very cool.
and I love I'm a big kind of like I am a big, I don't know how to say this right, but like there are so many things about movies that lots of people hate, where things about it,
Hmm.
little things about it, where I'm like, you did this part perfect. And that makes it all worthwhile for me for some reason. So like,
Got it.
like the
Hmm.
newer Tron that came out for Disney, not a particularly incredible story, it gets it moving
Very
forward for
simple.
sure.
Yes.
Very simple, but
Yeah.
like the spectacle of it and the soundtrack and like you've never seen a movie like this. Like still, there is not really a
I
movie
saw it
like
in theater and it was a crazy experience in the theater. So
totally
yeah, I
like the
agree with
first
you.
time, because that was also when 3D glasses were a thing, and it literally
It was. Yep.
so you're watching the movie and it switches from the real world to the digital world and it becomes 3D. And
That's
it
right.
was like I all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I got to put the glasses on. Like it was a really cool experience. Like so I think like I've been looking back on that, and also as a little nice throwback for Aaron as well. I was watching, I didn't finish it yet, but rewatching The Mask of Zorro.
Oh, so
Antonio
good.
Banderas the other day.
Of
Just
course, that's that was
such a good
a
movie.
yeah
A lot
that
darker than you realize too. Like
mm-hmm,
it's like some
mm-hmm.
real violence in that movie.
Yeah, I believe Catherine Zeta-Jones is in that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she had a pretty
Um,
profound effect on my 12, 13-year-old brain when I saw that movie. Yeah, as did Antonio Banderas, but before I actually saw him in a movie before I saw Zorro. He was in a film called Desperado.
mm,
I
Okay.
don't know if you ever saw Desperado.
I never saw
I
it,
would
but I
highly
know it was
recommend
good.
I would highly recommend it if you're into action films or if you are into Antonio Banderas being literally the coolest guy ever in the history of action film in that movie. Has one of the greatest, if not the greatest, opening sequence in all of action cinema, in my opinion. Steve Buscemi plays his brother somehow, Just make that leap. It's okay. And he tells this story of this guy coming into this bar and shooting it up, and they show you Steve Buscemi's telling the story, and then they show you like his version of the story as well. And you never really see Antonio Banderas's face, and he has like this long hair, and he would like he does like this really cool move where he puts his hand through his hair and then just has a gun. It's like the coolest shit. It's the coolest shit.
Classic.
Yeah. And so yeah, Selma Hayek's in that movie, which of course exploded my brain when I saw her. And yeah, I actually, this is a funny story. So this movie was rated R in Canada, and if you know anything about the ratings in Canada,
We're up one, right?
Sorry?
Are we up one or down one from what the US is?
So it goes G, PG, 14A, 18A, R. Okay. In the States, they just have the G and PG, PG 13 and R. Now, of course, there's the NC 17, but that's a whole other situation. So we have a couple of in-betweens there. And so what that did, especially back in the 90s and late 90s, is that it dictated if you could rent a movie or not as well, not only if you could see the movie. So what I did is I saw the cover. I was maybe 12, so this is probably 97, 98. I saw the cover and I was just like, Selma Hayek's on the back. It's her and Tony walking away, a giant explosion in the back. He's on the cover with this gun, and I'm just like, I have to see this movie. So what I did is I peeled off the R rating, because in Canada they just would put these stickers on, right? The little R. And so I peeled that off. I found another movie that had a PG rating, and I put it right over the R rating in the States, so it just said PG. Now, of course, guy running this little convenience store had no idea. He rented this movie to a 12-year-old. Of course, I show it to my parents. They're like, oh, it's PG. Totally cool. Why don't you watch it tonight when you're babysitting? So I had 2 younger siblings. They go to bed. I pop in my Desperado, and my mind exploded. I was not ready for that movie in so many different ways. But that movie is incredible. So yeah, Desperado is an incredible action movie. So yeah, Desperado.
Antonio Banderas. It's nice to see him getting the success again with the Puss in Boots movie, which is supposed to be very good, apparently.
Yeah, it's made a lot of money. It's made a lot of money.
So totally surprised when it got announced. I was like, all right, guys, another Shrek movie, cool. But it is one of those things. It's like Paddington 2, where it's kind of like, huh? This is coming out of nowhere. It's like a really good movie.
Then it makes like $500 million in the box office, and you're like, I guess people wanted to go see Puss in Boots. Like that's like a cat in boots. So
they've been missing it. They've been missing this thing. Yeah.
But I feel like Mask of Zorro was I don't know. I don't know how old you guys are, but like I felt like that everyone had that movie on VHS. Like every house you went into, if you went over to your friend, it was always one, because it was like PG or whatever. It was always one that you could just throw on.
Family movie.
Family movie. Yeah.
Fun. It's actiony. It's got romance.
It's funny.
It's got everything.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Tron and Mask of Zorro. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a newer one. I was just like, before we get back,
doesn't have to be newer.
But before we get back to the Hyland Theater stuff, I just wanted to point out one more thing, just because I like to. But it's I was pointing out that thing about how I like specific things about movies, right? So
yes,
I wanted, maybe you'll have an interesting thought about this. That new Flash trailer came out for the big GameSpot and everything, and so it features for spoilies, whatever, for the people, but it's like features General Zod from the original Man of Steel. Now, people, my partner included, do not like Man of Steel. A lot of people don't like that movie, don't like the direction it went in, everything like that. I am one of the people. I can't deny it. I'm one of the people who like a lot of things about that. It's not a perfect film, no doubt about it, but there are so many cool things that they did and so many cool ideas that, like, when you see this new Flash trailer and you see like Supergirl fighting them, I'm just so far in, it's ridiculous. Like, Like Zack Snyder's Justice
Well,
League,
it's
that 4-hour cut, I was in, all in on that, you know.
yeah. Well, I'm not a huge, not that this would be a longer conversation, but I'll just say, like, I don't go out of my way to see every superhero movie. I think there's merit in all different kinds of filmmaking. In that particular style of filmmaking, I wouldn't go as far to say some of the things that other filmmakers have said, respected filmmakers, that, you know, their museum rides and all that kind of stuff. They're just more escapism in that form of film than we'll say in, say, Taxi Driver. There's still escapism in Taxi Driver 2 in all films, but it's definitely less. But when you go and see Spider-Man No Way Home, that's a purely escapist movie, right? You're going in there, you're not thinking about your life, or where you shouldn't be anyway. You should just be thinking about, and I say that in a way that should be respectful to that kind of filmmaking, but also don't give it more respect than it requires, which I feel like there's this a kind of extreme where either people, like, you have to hate, you know, superhero movies, and then you're a true filmmaker or auteur or whatever, or you absolutely love them and they should be nominated for Oscars. Now, I don't believe either one of those. I don't believe either of those things, and I don't, because I don't, if you really sat me down, I don't think that any superhero movie should ever be nominated for any sort of Oscars at all. I just don't think so, in my opinion. Now, I could think of maybe a couple of exceptions to that rule, but I would also say that on the other side, I think that there's an incredible amount of merit and there's an incredible amount of entertainment value to be had with those films, and they're incredibly made to a point where, like, it's almost too much for your brain to handle, which is a crazy thing. And like, I've had a lot of fun with certain superheroes and stuff. So I just don't think either extreme is correct. So that would be my stance in it. All that being said, I actually was a huge fan of Man of Steel. I loved Zack Snyder, but also it's probably because I don't really give a shit about superhero movies. So I just would watch that movie and be like, I really liked what they did, because I'm not a Superman fan, never have been. If I was anyone, I'd be a Spider-Man guy. I love the animated series in the 90s. I'm a huge Tom Holland fan. I think the Spider-Man trilogy, they could just if they just made a new Spider-Man movie every year with Tom Holland in it, I would go and see it. I would be there with bells on, take all my money. But that's just me. I wouldn't say that about all superhero movies, but for me, that character and that his particular take on the character is the best, in my opinion. That's coming from a guy who's the biggest Sam Raimi fan ever. So anyway, I really liked Man of Steel, and yeah, I actually also agree with you that I love the Zack Snyder 4-hour cut. I was all in on that. But this is also coming from the guy who would defend Sucker Punch to the death. I love Sucker Punch. I thought it was a great movie. Thought it was a great time.
Like that. Definitely things to like about that movie. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying it's, again, the greatest film ever made. It's not Clockwork Orange, right? Like, that's not, it's not Barry Lyndon. It's not, it's not Fellini. It's not any of these things. But it is, it's a great musical. It's a great little story. Sometimes filmmakers do things to, I'll give you an example, because we talked about Desperado was made by this guy named Robert Rodriguez, who made and really changed filmmaking with Sin City. It was the first fully blue screen movie, right? Totally CGI generated. Well, the reason, that's why Spy Kids existed, is because he tried a few things out on Spy Kids that he would then use on Sin City. and that's exactly what Zack Snyder was doing with Sucker Punch. He took a story. I'm not saying he didn't have something to say with that movie, and I'm not saying that Robert Rodriguez didn't make Spy Kids for a certain reason, but they use these tools to be like, okay, can I try this out? Can I use this new technology in a way that, okay, it's, you know, it's Spy Kids is a kids movie. People will go see it anyway. Like, I'll just try a few things and see if it works. Oh, it works. So let me go and literally change movie making forever by making Sin City, right? Literally at least initially, every superhero movie wanted to be, you saw this, like, just not just superhero, but there's a lot of movies that just wanted to be Sin City. It has that look of well, it all goes back to what Robert Rodriguez did with Sin City and how he shot that movie. And I mean, it's from a graphic novel. And he actually used the graphic novel as his storyboards, which is like, I mean, that's why that guy is a brilliant independent filmmaker. So, you know, yeah, so yeah, there's always reasons to make movies. So, and that's one of them, and is to try new things out and try new technology out. And that's why things like Sucker Punch exist, and we get this really weird movie that kind of doesn't make sense, but kind of has this crazy soundtrack. And I don't know, I loved it. So I'm a kind of a weird guy that way when it comes to films, but and what I like. But I'm right there with you with the Zack. I'm a Zack Snyder fan. I really wasn't. With when he remade Dawn of the Dead, I was like, I mean, that's sacrilege where I come from. That's, you're stomping on, you know, you're doing some things in a church that you're not supposed to be doing. Like, that's kind of what you're doing. To me, if he just called that movie, I don't know, Road of the Dead or literally anything, and just had a standalone movie, it would be a fine movie. It's actually a pretty good movie if you don't think of it as a Dawn of the Dead remake. But I was so like wrapped up so I was not a fan of his. But I am actually a really big Watchmen fan. I mean, an R-rated superhero movie, a giant blue penis is in the movie. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy that he made that movie, and it would cost so much money. And, you know, it was such a hot button for like a couple of weeks there when it came out. Everybody was talking about this giant blue penis on the screen, which is hilarious to me.
Which he put in more in the movie than it was in the comic. I love that, man. He's so,
I
so
know.
funny.
Yeah.
It's just,
yeah.
like, that's what I love about Zack Snyder. But we'll get it. Well, that's a whole other podcast.
It is.
But we do want to focus a bit more on the Hyland Cinema before we finish up and everything here. Speaking of, like, you know, great technology and stuff helping to like do stuff, like, you do run events beyond just the cinema speculation film series. There's those Retromania nights, like we're talking about. There's also like holiday movies that will have like horror films around Halloween, that kind of stuff.
So we
as well, right?
Yeah, so our Retromania series is the last Friday of every month. We always pick like a classic movie that we think, you know, a lot of times it'll be an anniversary film, like Enter the Dragon it's the 50th anniversary this year. It's the 30th anniversary, I believe, of JFK. These kind of movies that are sort of, you know, bigger movies, classics. We always, and sometimes we pick something a little off the beaten path. We show a lot of 35 millimeter film for our Retromanias, or we try to as much as possible. So that's the last Friday of every month. They're extremely popular, and it's very cool to see everyone out. We have a lot of regulars and all that kind of stuff, and it's a lot of fun. So the second Friday of every month, we always do a horror film. Again, same kind of deal. We try to show as much film as we can. We always try to pick something that's interesting and cool. We do a family film series once a month, which is usually on a Sunday. This month it's Shrek. Interestingly enough, you brought up Puss in Boots. So this year it's Shrek, or this month it's Shrek. We're going to be showing it on the 19th and 20th of February, so on Family Day as well. So there's an extra screening. So we do that once a month. In October, we do what's called Horror at the Hyland, which is a horror film fest where it's similar to the Cinema Speculation in the sense of it's a movie every week that's part of a series. So obviously in October it's all horror movies. and we'll run it every Friday in October. So this coming year will be its third year. We did it in 2021, my first year at the cinema, and we did it this past year in 2022. It was amazing. Actually, our biggest single event in 2022 was from the Horror at the Hyland series in October. It was Beetlejuice, which we showed on 35 millimeter. We had over 200 people out. It was phenomenal. We also do one-time events too. Like we just did The Room. Tommy Wiseau's The Room. We could probably, if you know anything about that movie, we could do a whole separate podcast just specifically on that movie. And we had almost 200 people out for that film as well. So we try to do as much as we can to get like interesting new or old but new single events as well. Local filmmakers, different rentals that we'll do. Like people will come in and rent the movie and put the tickets up for sale for the public. We do what's called a Make It Happen film, which is sometimes people will call in and be like, hey, we want to see this movie, and we'll be like, we think that's great. Let's see if we can get 50 people. I think it's usually around 50 people to buy tickets. And if we can sell those, then we show the movie. So it's like a Make It Happen thing. We've done it for specific movies. We've done it for certain films that we're not sure if we can play like every day, like our normal films. So that's kind of a really interesting series, and can get some really interesting films out of it as well. So we're always doing new stuff, always trying new things as well, bringing new films in. We have a lot of cool stuff happening in February and March. And I did talk to the owner today, and she did mention this, so I'm going to go with it. And we will announce our very special April series right now on this podcast. We're going to be showing all three Austin Powers films in April. So
wow.
That's a family favorite of ours.
They're so phenomenal. They're so phenomenal. So the 14th, the 21st, and the 28th of April, every week you can come and see an Austin Powers movie here. So we're hoping that we have some really cool stuff in the works for those screenings. Obviously, there's a lot to draw from in terms of look, and one takes place in the 60s and the 90s and the 70s, so there's a lot to draw from. Tickets are not available yet. Like I said, I just kind of decided today that we would make the announcement. So tickets will be up later on, probably in 2 or 3 weeks or so. But the films are booked, and we've been working on that series quietly as we've been getting other series and other films going. So, but yeah, that will be in April.
Very exciting.
That's awesome. The amount of times that our family quotes Goldmember is probably ridiculous.
Crazy.
I was gonna say Goldmember is highly underrated. People don't give that
highly underrated.
People, especially like you say, with time, like watching it now, watching Beyonce in that movie now.
Yeah.
It's so much more fun.
Beyonce's in that movie.
Like watching that now is incredible.
That opening scene is unbelievable
with Tom Cruise and and all that stuff. Oh, it's too good.
Unbelievable. And yeah, that I actually saw that. It was why that movie sticks out to me, aside from how funny it is and how much it made me laugh. I was like the perfect age for that movie when it came out. I was like 14, and it was just like, all the toilet humor and all of that stuff just hit me the right way. I also grew up one of the ways I first fell in love with film was through James Bond films. So my mom and I would watch James Bond movies, and so all the references, there's so many references to James Bond movies. Specifically, I would even say more so in Goldmember than anything. And with Michael Caine's character and like a lot of the stuff they do. But anyway, in all of the movies, so I got a whole nother level that a lot of other 14-year-olds didn't get, because they hadn't seen The Spy Who Loved Me. So The Spy Who Shagged Me, they were like, well, what is this, right? So anyway, the reason why this movie stands out is because it was the very first time that I went to the movie theater and saw 2 movies on the same day. I'd never done that before in my life. So I went and so me and a friend, we went and saw Gold Member first, and then the second film we saw was Blow with
Oh, wow.
Johnny Depp, and a very different kind of movie.
Yeah.
Penelope Cruz is in it. Unbelievable film. Like it's a I loved that movie. I loved it when I saw it. I've watched it since. It's a great film. Very Scarface-esque to me. It has very Scarface vibes, but to see that Gold Member in the theater, I mean, I just remember tears. Just
Mhm.
just I couldn't breathe. Like I was laughing so hard. And yeah, that was crazy time. Crazy
Same
time.
here. Same
Yeah.
here. We saw that in theaters as well, and I just remember the scene of once he puts Mini-Me in a pillowcase and starts
Uh-huh.
pulling him around that room. I like almost fell out of my
Yeah.
theater seat.
Yeah.
I remember it was just
I
like
mean,
my
the
stomach
whole
hurt.
the whole mole sequence.
Oh
I
my,
couldn't
it's the best.
I couldn't like I couldn't breathe. Like I
Mhm.
was like, this scene has to end because I'm going to pass out. Like I thought I thought I was going to pass out. I was laughing so hard. Yeah, that film there's so many great moments in that film. Sometimes I even forget like it's the same movie, like because
Mhm.
there's like so much that happens in those films. Um, like sometimes I forget, oh yeah, that's in the same, like that's right. Gold Member is actually in Gold Member. That's right.
Yeah.
And then
What am I missing?
Beyonce's in it. Like yeah, like all that stuff. Like but yeah, so we're gonna be playing all three of them in April. So hopefully we can get the word out and people can come out and enjoy those films on the big screen because they're a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Oh yeah, we'll be there for sure because the amount my boyfriend's Dutch and the amount of times our dad does there's only two things I can't stand in this world: people who are intolerant of other people's cultures and the
And the Dutch.
Dutch.
I'm from
Weird.
Holland. Isn't
Isn't
that
that
weird?
weird?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
just
I
too
love
easy
it.
to quote. It's too easy to quote. It's
Too
too
easy
good.
to quote. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure. So yeah, that's what's coming up. I mean, we always have new movies coming out as well. Always on Friday. Our schedule starts or our week starts on Fridays. So that's when our new movies a show. And obviously right now is Oscar season, so we're bringing a bunch back. We already talked about Everything Everywhere, but we're bringing Elvis back. So it'll be here for a couple weeks. We'll be bringing Marcel the Shell with Shoes On back as well, which might be one of the cutest movies ever made in the history of movies. We have the Oscar shorts as well. So the animation, documentary, and live action categories. So the short films, you can see all the nominated films here at the theater as well. So I
Very
mean,
cool.
yeah, a lot of cool stuff coming up. Obviously, we already talked about the Cinema Speculation series, but before that, Black History Month is in February. So we're doing The Bodyguard, which stars Whitney Houston. We're doing that on the 25th of February. We're doing Spike Lee's film Do the Right Thing. I don't know if there's a better place to show Do the Right Thing than an independent cinema. So that's a couple of other films that we're showing, one-time shows that we're showing this month. Our retromania for February is Labyrinth, starring David
Wicked.
Bowie and Jennifer Connelly. We could probably do a whole separate podcast on the relationship between those two in that movie, because that is some strange 80s weird, kids film shit that like I don't know how that's was. I don't know. It's a thing, and he's
Mhm.
tossing babies up in the air, and there's little tiny talking caterpillars. Like I'm not. It's a great classic film. So definitely come out and see that. That's on February 24th at 9:30. Again, don't know exactly when this is coming out. So if it's past, I'm sure it was a great event. If it's coming up, then we'll hope to see you guys out there for the 24th. So
I was gonna
yeah,
say
that's
this comes out on the 24th. So
okay.
come
Well,
see it tonight.
come out tonight and see Labyrinth. It'll
Yeah.
be awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, that's I think I've tried to hit as much as I can of the upcoming stuff. So yeah, we always get new films and we always have new series. So our I guess our website, hylandcinema.com, has all the coming soon stuff. It has if you want to know all the guests for Cinema Speculation or the film lineup for that series, or the lineup for any one of our films or days, you can go to hylandcinema.com. You can find us at Hyland Cinema on Instagram and Facebook. Do believe we have a TikTok. You can find a lot of our homemade, in-house made trailers, usually by myself or Zach. One of the two of us will cut custom trailers for our events, so we post them on our YouTube channel. Sometimes they hit an algorithm and pop off with crazy views, and sometimes only 5 people watch them. So, and who knows how that works, but yeah, that's where you can find a lot of our most of our custom trailers is there. So on the YouTube channel. Yeah.
The final thing I want to touch on before we get into, before we have London-based questions, as London's pretty cool, is the Hyland has a membership program.
Yes,
so
it does.
Kind of, what is that? Why do you think, like, who are the people that you think would really enjoy this membership program, and how can they get involved into it?
Well, if you're just like kind of stopping by every now and again, or if you're specifically coming just for our events, like our retro event or our horror event, then I would probably pass on the membership. Our membership program doesn't apply to most of our events, not all of them. We just did The Notebook last night, and there was membership pricing for that film. So sometimes our one-time films do still have memberships attached, but typically they don't. So if you come to a Retromania, it's $15 for everybody, regardless if you're a member or not. So if you only come to the movie theaters once or twice a year, or you just come to our events, then I would pass. If you are interested in coming out to a lot more movies on a daily basis, or you're coming out to the films that play on a weekly basis, then the membership, I would start looking into the membership program, because it will save you money. So our regular price tickets are $13. Our membership price tickets are $9. So basically, if you come and see 4 movies, it's going to pay for itself, because our membership is $15 for the year. So if you see four movies during the year, it's going to pay for itself. You're going to then save your $4 on your films, and you're laughing. So that's sort of the people that I think would benefit from the membership program, are those like coming to the theater, or at least coming to the theater like once every couple of months to see a film. Yeah.
Yeah, as past members, we need to get ones for this year. Hopefully my boyfriend isn't listening to this, because I'll likely do it for his birthday. But
I can hook you up. I
yeah.
can take care of that for you.
It's definitely worth it. It's really fun to go in, you flash your card. Like, yeah,
Yes.
remember, let me in. We just live close enough, so it's always worth it. That's where we go see all of our movies. It's great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, yeah. So definitely, yeah, I mean, we do have members that are not just from London, but the surrounding areas. So don't feel like, oh, I live in I don't know, like east way almost. I live almost in I don't know, Woodstock. Let's say I live in almost like between London and Woodstock. Like, we have people that live in St. Thomas that are members. We have people that are definitely in the surrounding area that are members. So it doesn't just have to be people in the city or close by, though it's great when that happens. It just yeah, we have, as long as you're coming to the theater once every couple of months to see a movie, it's gonna be worth it for you. So,
and if you're in the South End, the best thing to do is go get a beer at Storm State and then go to the Hyland. It's a perfect little night.
That is a classic move. Yeah, that is a classic move. It's not too far away, and definitely have some good beer over there. That's for sure.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for chatting with us all about these, like how awesome the Hyland is. We are going to get into a few London-based questions, because London's pretty cool.
Yes.
So before we get into that, is there anything else you would like to say about the Highland before we get into that?
No, I don't think so. I think I've probably talked enough. So yeah, no, I think I've said everything. I do appreciate the name of your podcast because I like how you're setting expectations, and that's really what it's all about.
Just
It's
personal.
not it's not London's greatest podcast. It's not London's, the greatest city in the history of mankind. It's London's pretty cool. And like that's where the expectation should be so that it always can be exceeded, right? And you can always find cool stuff in the city because there's usually something going on in the city. That's what I've every time like I'm in this city, I would say almost every day, if not every day, even though I don't live in the city. And I can tell you there's always something interesting going on. It's not really one of those towns that feels like nothing's happening, you know? And so anyways, all I wanted to say was that I like how you set the bar and then you guys exceed the bar because then you can like go above it, right? It's pretty cool.
It's pretty
And
cool.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, we don't want anyone to think this is the greatest place in the world. We're doing our best.
That's
And
right. That's a very
also,
London attitude.
yeah.
We're doing our best. We're going to do our best. And we got some pretty cool stuff here. Yeah.
Yeah, and if people want to know what's going on in the city every single day, we do post on our Instagram what goes on every single day.
And we appreciate you doing that because I know like Zach, who runs our social media, he always retweets or shares like your guys' posts on Instagram when you post a Highland event, and that's very cool that you do that. So we appreciate that.
Of course, of course. If it's a pretty cool thing going on, we got to talk
Yeah,
about
we
it.
try to be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mike, what would you say is your favorite place to eat in London?
Favorite. Well, there's like favorite places, and then there's like the places that you just eat most often. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so right, like tonight, I did it tonight. So there's like this pizza place right across from the Highland, well, almost directly across from the Highland, called Piero's, I believe. And they just moved locations. Yeah. They just moved locations. And by move locations, I mean move just slightly to the left.
Yeah.
But they're in a bigger place. And then much more room, because that place, if you ever go there at like 5:30, I mean, you might as well like take your phone in there. You're going to be there for a while because that place is a hopping place between like 5 and 6 o'clock, 5 and 6:30. So, but anyway, I go there a lot. They have a great deal. 2 slices of pizza, which I got tonight, 2 slices of pizza and a can of pop for $5, no tax, unless you pay by debit. So pretty much the best deal in the city as far as I am concerned. And so I eat there quite often, and it's not like you're getting like a really chintzy slice of pizza or whatever. I mean, they're making stuff fresh all the time. You get like a legit 2 slices of pizza. So yeah, I mean, that's a favorite place of mine because it's close, it's cheap. I don't know how good it is for me. So if that's your concern, I would probably stay away from that place. Or any fast food whatsoever. If you think you're going to eat healthy at one of those places, you're crazy. But if you want some really good tasting pizza for $5, that's the place to go. So yeah, that I also am a big fan of Burger Priest. I think there's one on Wellington, I want to say. So big fan of Burger Priest. I realize that's a little bit more expensive of quote unquote fast food, I guess. But I love Burger Priest. And so yeah, those are 2 places I've been at and have enjoyed. So yeah.
What about this could go food wise, or it could go beyond there. What about a local small business that you couldn't live without?
That's a great question. I can think of a few, but I mean, I guess they're a little bit of a chain, but like again, just not too far down from the Highland is a Game Cycle. And I love, like, if I'm at work early, and I have 15, 20 minutes to kill, I'm always in there. I usually end up spending $10 or $20. Like I said, I at the beginning of this podcast, I'm a huge physical media guy, so I love having movies in physical form. So I always find good stuff there. And if and nothing else, I can kill 15 minutes or 20 minutes or a half an hour at that place. There's another location, I believe, on Hamilton. So you can check that place out. But I just go to the one, I've been to that location, but the one that I go to the most, obviously, is right down from the Hyland. So that's one. One of our ex-manager, who's a great person, her name's Steph. She works at the Mission Store in London, the thrift store. And I find myself there a lot. Again, physical, not just physical media. There's like different things that I like. I'm a huge thrifter. I love thrifting. I love finding a good deal on movies and physical media, books and CDs and that kind of thing. So that's right beside. There's a print place there, and I believe a women's shelter or something in that plaza. There's a few different things in there. So yeah, the Mission Thrift Store. They always have good deals too. Like every couple of weeks, it'll be like half price on media or like 75% off on this or whatever. So I always go there. Plus, I like to give Steph a little plug. She does a lot of their online sales, or all of their online sales there. And she's great human being. So give her a shout out. She worked a long time at the Hyland, taught me a lot of things before she left. So always appreciative of her. Yeah, that's I go to the Mission Store a lot, so I go there. Dugout thrift store, also vintage clothes. I believe they're called Dugout. Guy's name there is Tristan, I believe, one of the owners, one of the guys there in the circle. Met him at the he came to the Hyland. We talked to him for a bit. Super cool dude, all focused on their business, totally focused on vintage clothing, vintage t-shirts. They're always hanging out at Western University. I have Western Radio on the mind because that's the next thing I have to do in like a week and a half. It's all Oscar stuff. So I was looking into that or starting to brush up on all my Oscar stuff today. Anyway, Dugout, they're really cool. Cool people over there too. Wanted to give them a plug as well. And again, vintage stuff I'm always a fan of. And that's kind of obviously a big thing with a certain kind of or a certain generation right now, the younger generation, the vintage clothes, which is weird. Not weird, but it's weird that it's from like I could get those clothes as a kid. To me, vintage is like 65 or 75 or something, but for them it's like 95 or 98. 2002 or something. So anyway, I think those that's a couple of local stuff that I could shout out.
What about London likes to consider ourselves as the city of neighborhoods. Do you have a favorite neighborhood in London?
Interesting you say that. So big World Cup fan. I'm a big World Cup fan. I mean, like, I just like the whole World Cup, like, just as a thing. I know it's like all corrupt and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So, like, you know, they're standing on the, all these, doing all these terrible things, slave labor, the whole 9 yards, building stadiums in countries that don't even have food to eat, all that stuff. Terrible. That being said, I'm a big fan of the football thing or the soccer thing when it's like on such a giant scale. I just think it's really cool. So obviously this year there was a World Cup. I also have a lot of friends in the UK. They really got me into watching soccer like on a regular basis or semi-regular basis with like following certain leagues like the Premier League and the Champions League. And I still don't really understand why certain leagues exist and how they can play in like 8 different leagues at the same time. I don't think it makes any sense. But anyway, I do try to follow. I do have a team, all that stuff. Okay, so World Cup was this year. And so I found myself, just because of when the games were scheduled, that I would be starting work like in the middle of a match that I really wanted to watch, or a match was just ending. So like if there was like a 10 a.m. match or 11 a.m. match or something, and I'd be working at like say 1 o'clock or 1:30 or 2 o'clock, that match would just end and I have to be at work. So, and because I live so far away, I was like, okay, what can I do? And so what I was looking for is a place that I could like feel okay hanging out in for like a couple of hours, get some food, right? And but also it'd be really like relatively close to work, because I didn't want to have to drive across the city after, you know what I mean? I'd want.
Yeah.
So I found myself, that's a long way to say, but this is why I kind of fell in love with the village, was Wortley Village. So, which is right kind of behind the Hyland Cinema, not too far down the road. It's just this like almost separate city. Like it is London. It's no denying that it's London, but it's like a little town within a city. I just found people were like super nice. They were like, anyone that was like serving me, or people run into people on the street or whatever, just like people were just super nice. It was like I said, it was just like a town within a bigger city, and it just kind of felt like you were in a different place, even though it's like only like one street. It's like it's like a cross street with like a bunch of stuff. Like, I mean, there's obviously more to it than that, but I'm just saying it's not like this giant village of like spanning many miles and hundreds of thousands of people. It's like, no, it's like this little kind of hideaway, and there's a cool pub there, and I just ended up liking the food, and I think it's called the Wortley Pub, I believe. And it's just cool. It's cool, and they always had all the games on, and they were just really nice. So I found myself hanging out in that part of the village a lot. So yeah.
Love it.
As a Wortley local, I love it here. So I got to agree.
Yeah.
Village
Yeah.
Pub is great.
Yeah. I definitely dug it. So, I mean, not that I didn't know that it existed, I just hadn't spent any time there. So when that was just my way into actually spending time. Like I had driven through it, but like I hadn't like spent any time there. So
Yeah.
during the World Cup, I spent a bunch of time in Wortley Village. So yeah.
Well, it's time now, Mike, for the final game of the podcast. So basically, we do a sort of a lightning round game for the final edition here. It's a classic game here on London's Pretty Cool Podcast. It's called This
Or
This or that. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, like I said, we're going to give you two options. It's a lightning round, so you're going to have to answer as quick as possible, and we're just going to go. It's basically options about London, and we'll see where your
loyalties lie.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready. I hope I don't offend too many people. I love all of London. So there you go. Okay.
We'll see about that.
Yeah.
Starting off, London's Fair Market or Covent Garden Market?
Western Fair.
Oh, excuse me. Western Fair Market or Covent Garden Market?
Western.
Grooves Records or Odyssey Records?
Odyssey.
Masonville Mall or White Oaks Mall?
White Oaks, baby. I've been a White Oaks my whole life. In the 90s, but I was
You always know White Oaks.
4 or 5 years old, man. I was going to White Oaks Mall. So I'm White Oaks till I die. Yeah, White Oaks.
Locomotive or Sidetrack?
Locomotive.
How about parks? Springbank Park or Gibbons?
I'm gonna go Gibbons on that one.
Fanshawe College or Western University?
Ooh, that's so tough, man. Oh, that's so tough. You're gonna split my loyalties. Okay, I'm gonna stick on brand. That's how I'm gonna make this decision. I'm gonna stick on brand, and I'm gonna say Western University. Even though my little asterisk to that is that I'm not a university kid. Definitely not a university kid. I'm not an institutionalized human being. I don't like universities, but I like Western University. I like that they support the Hyland. Not that Fanshawe doesn't, but Western Radio and Elijah and everyone over there, they've been really great to us. We are bringing Western University profs to the Hyland for the Cinema Speculation series. So they've always been very kind to us. So I'm going to be on brand and say Western University.
There you go. I love it. Well,
That was a tough one. That was really tough.
This one will be a lot easier. This one will be a lot easier. Wortley Village or Old East Village?
Wortley. You already knew that though.
Yeah.
Exactly, much easier.
Yeah.
London Brewing Co-op or Anderson Craft Ales?
Brewing Co-op.
What about going to see a Knights game or a London Majors game?
Oh, Knights game, man. I've been going to Knights games I think probably the first quote unquote professional game I ever went to, hockey game I ever went to, was a London Knights game. So yeah, I go London Knights all the way.
Bookstores, if you're a reader, Brown and Dixon or City Lights?
City Lights, and I'll give a special shout out to the thrifts. What thrift store is that on Wellington? It's the donation store for what's the thrift store called? It's on Wellington. It's a book depository there, or like donation store.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm blanking on it. I wanted to give them a special shout out because I go there all the time. And of course I can't remember what the name is. Hold on.
They're yelling at home.
Is it
Yeah, they're like,
Scout?
oh, I know exactly where that is, and you don't go to it because you can't think of it. Well, I have a lot of things in my brain right now that it's hard to renew. Value Village. No, Goodwill.
Goodwill? It's the Goodwill. Yeah.
It's the Goodwill one on Wellington.
On Horton.
Yeah, and it's kind of like hidden. It's kind of like, but you have to go down like a road that it's kind of hard to get to. It's just kind of hidden, but it's really cool. They have a lot of really cool books there, and they always get like a lot of cool new stuff. And it's not like a thrift store, like they don't sell everything else. It's literally mostly books. They have some records, of course. They have VHS tapes, another reason why I go there. They have Blu-rays, DVDs. But anytime I'm coming down Wellington and I have 5 minutes, I stop off there, and I always find something there. So I wanted to give a special shout out to them because I'm always there. I know they're more. I know Goodwill is like or whatever is more corporate, but they're kind of a cool little hole in the wall. So there you go.
Yeah.
Edgar and Joe's is sweet there too.
Yes.
What about bike the Thames Valley Parkway or hike on one of our environmentally significant areas, like the trails that we have?
Well, I don't do either of those things. And if I stood up, you would see that I'm telling the truth. If I was to choose one of those things, I would say hike. I would like a hike better. Yeah.
Hike more than a bike.
Yeah.
Black Walnut or Asmara Coffee?
Oh, Asmara Coffee for sure. Yeah.
That's taken the wave. A lot of people love that place right now.
Mm-hmm.
What about for beer? Back to beer here. Powerhouse or Storm Stayed breweries?
Oh, now I have to think of where I'm gonna go Powerhouse, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Powerhouse.
Such a good spot.
It is.
Richmond Row or Dundas Place?
Dundas Place. Mm-hmm.
And last question, Harris Park or Victoria Park?
Victoria Park.
And you finished it with an easy one. I love it. Perfect. Congratulations. You made it through, Mike.
Yes.
Not everybody makes it through as easy as you did. You as unscathed as you did.
Yeah.
So
Well, there were some tough questions in there. I had to. All I did was think, okay, where I gotta be on brand here. So that's how I tried to make the harder decisions. But with games like that, you have to just choose the first thing that
comes to your mind.
That comes to your mind that you had an experience. That's at least if you sit there and hum and haw about it, then it's not. I don't think it's the right way to play that game. It's like, oh yeah, I was just at Victoria Park, like it was cool. I'll choose that one, right? Like I like that or whatever, right?
And usually the subconscious, when it comes to like it is about that. It's all about like, well, the first thing that comes to your head usually is the right choice, like
that's right. The Western Fanshawe one was tougher because I had a lot of friends that went to Fanshawe, worked with a lot of Fanshawe kids. Zach here is a Fanshawe graduate. I'm also a college kid, so also an institution, I realize, but it's just a different institution, I believe. So So that's it's hard to get away from, you know, all those ties. But I think, like I said, I think I made the right decision. I don't regret any of my choices. So
That's
I
why you
love
got to
it.
go away with it. I regret
that's right.
nothing.
That's right.
Right.
That's
Well,
right.
Mike, speaking of regretting nothing, I regret nothing about this episode. This has been a fantastic episode today, and I think all our listeners are going to learn so much about the Highland they didn't know before, and so much about like yourself as well, and movies, and about us.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really great episode for learning about everybody here. So I just want to thank you for taking the time out,
Of
and we really
course.
appreciate that.
Well, thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting me rant and rave about things. We do like to do that here at the Highland. You may catch some of us in a heated debate as to what movie does this, or what actress, or what actor, or what person, or what filmmaker is the best this or that. And we love having those conversations, not just with ourselves, with the staff, but with the customers as well. And I always get to learn new things. Like today, a customer told me that the film that we're playing, Living, starring Bill Nye, who's nominated for an Oscar for his role in this movie, is actually based on a Akira Kurosawa film. And I didn't know that. And he told me that, and now I know that, and I can tell other people that, and that's really cool. And that's one of the reasons why it's great to work here, because people like to talk. They like to talk movies, and we like to talk movies too, the people that work here. So, and I'm not alone in that. Vic, our projections, has been working in film and in movie theaters for his whole life. He has lots of thoughts about things. Zach's also a film graduate. He has lots of thoughts on things. So does Maura's been running the theater for 20 years or whatever, it's how long it's been. She has lots of thoughts has seen tons of films. So there's no shortage of opinions or critics around these parts, and it's what makes coming to the movies fun, or part of it anyways. If you're looking for that experience, it's going to be something a little different than what you'd get going to another competing megaplex theater place. So we will talk to you, and we want to have conversations about film with you. So I appreciate you guys having me on and talking about the Highland and London in general, because London's pretty cool, and you guys have a pretty cool podcast. And so hopefully you can invite me again. If you didn't hate this experience too much, feel free to invite me anytime, and I will ramble on about whatever you want me to ramble on about. So
Amazing. Thanks, Mike.
It's always great to talk movies.
My name's Mike Klassen. I'm the assistant manager at the Hyland Cinema in London, Ontario, and you are listening to London's Pretty Cool Podcast.